For
Okay,
equipment,
folks.
cleats, and accessories, you got to call Game Gear Sports in Bedford Hills at 914-666-9200.
We are kind of back. Hey, we are back. I tell you, Adam, great job today, buddy. It sounds sarcastic, but you are in the poo-poo storm of poo-poo storms of technology this morning, and you're doing a great job. We're back here on Let Them Play with Coach Tony, and we are live with Dr. Judith Bevis, who is a neuropsychologist as well as a parent in the hamlet of Swampscott, Massachusetts, where this whole bunch of shenanigans went down. We are back here with Dr. Bevis. Hey, before we get back to Dr. Bevis, we are going to start taking some of your calls. We have opened up the studio lines at 914-693-5700, and apparently, I believe some of our technical snafus are boiling down, and people can hear us again online. But we're going to go to Sarah, who is calling in. Hey, Sarah, you are on Let Them Play. How are we doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine. How are you?
Where are you calling in from, Sarah?
I'm calling in from Nahant, Massachusetts, and I have a child that's a senior at the Swampscott High School. So I was privy to what you so aptly called the shenanigans that went down the other day.
Okay. So what's your opinion on all this?
Well, I've got to say that there are a couple of issues here. Number one, the policy that they put forth, not only far overreaches the MIAA policy that a lot of parents, have been signing over the years for their student athletes, but it also overreaches, Massachusetts state law, and that's one issue. I mean, as there are certain things that as a parent in Massachusetts, I have the right to let my child have a glass of wine at the Thanksgiving table in my home, and that's not allowed under this policy.
Well, hang on a second, because I don't mean to jump in, but hey, it's my show and I'm going to jump in. I thought I heard Dr. Bevis say that in that code of conduct it did say without parental consent.
I heard her say that too, and I don't understand that to be true.
Well, Dr. Judith, Dr. Judith, I'm sorry, I don't want to start your own show. Dr. Bevis, is that something you read straight from the policy?
What I'm understanding is the school can jump in to, I don't know what I meant when I said without parental consent, because I can't remember the context. But what the point is that the school is jumping in to areas that parents thought we had domain, was our domain. And the school is saying, no, it's our domain, and we have opinions about it, and we're going to be able to do something about it, even though you don't think that's the problem. Well,
again, I think we're getting into some fuzzy area here because, like I said, if I hear parental consent and I decide that in my own home, first of all, if I give my...
The policy doesn't say parental consent. I'm sorry to interrupt. Judy misspoke.
Okay.
It does not say parental consent.
Right.
There's no wording in the policy that allows for a child to have a sip of wine as part of a religious communion. There's no wording in the policy that allows an 18-year-old who legally purchases tobacco in the spring of their senior year and smokes a cigarette at home, that child can be punished. So she misspoke, and the policy does overreach Massachusetts state law in a number of ways. But more importantly, I think a point that's being made that's really the more salient issue here is that Lane Millington, the principal, stood up and told us all these stories about how terrible the problem is at our school, and how in the first couple months of the school year, 5 student athletes were punished under the MIAA policy. Well, you know what? To me, as a parent, that indicates that these zero-tolerance punitive policies aren't working. And why should I, as a parent, be forced to sign a policy that's even more broad and more punitive and less tolerant when I see from evidence in my community, when I see from studies that I look at online, that these things are not actually helping our kids and might be hurting them? Especially the thing about the bystander, because a child that reaches out to a friend in need who might be drunk and, need a safe ride home or, something like that, that child can now be punished. So you're punishing kids that are making responsible decisions and keeping kids safe.
Now, I agree. The last thing you said, unfortunately, Sarah, is the only thing that I agree with that you kind of said, because I think, and I do think, by the way, the first time a kid gets punished for giving another kid a ride home, call the station, and I will send a nationwide network of nutcases like myself to wherever you live and make that right. I've never heard, and if anyone has, please call the studio. But I've never heard of a kid getting punished under a substance abuse policy for being the designated driver or for going somewhere to help a friend. So that one, I'm going to reserve the right to see, kind of a wait and see if that one happens. You start talking about stuff you do in the house. Listen, when the day is done, if you have a private home, and let's say I decided that me and TJ were going to break out the crack pipe and start hitting it. Guess what? No one's ever going to know, and you're never going to be punished for doing that. And that's a very drastic example. Let's get back to the more subtle example of having a sip of wine in your house. The school policy may very well not allot for that, for lack of a better term, but let's be realistic. Dr. Bevis, if you're having, whether it's a Seder or, the traditional Italian, 7 fishes Christmas Eve dinner or whatever it is that you do, and you're having a bottle of wine and you let your kids partake, and by the way, when we have a toast around the table, I let my kids participate. No one is ever going to get caught for that, and I don't think it's really appropriate to talk about the school policies there. I think what's happening is your school has either failed with its initial policy and is trying to do a little, cover their own butt, and maybe the first part of their policy isn't working, and their response is we have to do something more drastic. So I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm not saying it's not going to work. What I am saying is the school is at least stepping up and trying. So I think a lot of what Sarah just said from Massachusetts, it seems like there's some frustration building up, Dr. Bevis, clearly within your community. And I think that, well, let me ask you this. As a parent, for me, the thing that jumps off the page in this story, the terrible crime that has indeed been committed is if I, as a school administrator, literally force you to come to a meeting, I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have with it is how do I force you to come to the meeting and not give you any platform? How do I not garner and elicit input from the parents so that we're creating policies that we all think can work? The ultimate decision comes down to the school because it's their school, right? But I think the real spot that these idiots fell down on, Dr. Bevis, is not in inviting and welcoming some of the input of the parents. What do you think of that?
You are absolutely right, and I could not agree with you more. So what we're doing is parents are putting together some ideas that really need to be thought out, and we have opened up a little web account, and I'll give you it. It's called Repeal and Rethink at yahoo.com.
I'll repeat that, Repeal and Rethink at yahoo.com. Everyone go check that out.
And we know what we would do. You can't check it. It's not a web. What we want to do, we want to hear your ideas. Email us. What ideas do you have? What do you think's good? What do you think's bad? How would you address it? Because I think what happened in this whole process, all of the ideas were not put on the table. There are a lot of ideas, and we just weren't asked in a way that we heard that they are our opinions. And I think what we're having to do is now come to the table after the policy was put forth, and we're asking them, repeal it and let's rethink it. And let's see what problems really are in a community. What do we want to address as a community?
Or perhaps not even repeal. Keep it in place, but in the process, put together some kind of a parent committee so you at least get some ideas. You'll never come up with something innovative when you're thinking in a vacuum. And I think, you talk about these school administrators. The fact of the matter is the kids in the community is who this impacts the most. And who's got the most direct impact on these kids in the community? Mom and dad. I think you're a special kind of stupid that I used to have a really good word for that I think is Mongo. Okay, we got a bunch of Mongos. Thanks for reminding me, Adam. A bunch of Mongos who are running this school system who are being very dictatorial in their approach in saying, here's what's going to happen. I commend them for at least having a policy. And you know what? I would err on a more strict policy than a more lenient policy when it comes to kids and substance abuse because, let's face it, tons of problems. Kids die each year because of their inability to manage the use of these substances. I've said it 1,000 times. Are my kids going to try alcohol? Of course they are. Are they going to have opportunities to experiment with drugs? Of course they are. If you think your kid is not going to try these things, you are a Mongo. I'm going to start getting used to that word. You are a special kind of stupid if you think your kid is not going to have exposure to this. I hope that my kids are the ones who give someone a ride home when they need it. I hope my kids are the ones that are going to be a good friend and gain experiences along the way, but ultimately make the right decisions. And I think here's where it gets a little fuzzy, and Dr. Bevis, I think you and I will agree on this. These life experiences, and that's what they are, life experiences, these experimentations are going to happen, and they are important in the development of an adult mind. Not a young mind, but as you're teaching them to become adults. My favorite line when it comes to this is, The Breakfast Club. When, the first kid gets dropped off, or he got in some trouble, and he had to go to detention, and what did the dad say to him? He said, listen, everybody screws around, Sporto. You got caught. So while I believe these things are going to happen, I also believe that there are consequences for these actions, and that's what I try to teach my kids. Hey, TJ, is that can of beer really worth you getting kicked off the team for a year? Or whatever the punishment is. By the way, I do believe in zero tolerance policy. I think the issue comes down to what exactly are the consequences for the action. So in this case, if it's a year, guess what? TJ, is it worth drinking a beer if you know you're running the risk of being off the team for a year? That's where I think we are with this one, Dr. Bevis.
Well, Tony, it's just, what I would suggest is we need to open up ourselves to all the ideas that are out there. I'd like to direct you to another website that the folks at Children's Hospital have put together. It's called www.teen-safe.org, www.teen-safe.org, which really starts to explain the neuroscience of adolescent brains. I want to stress that it's important that we make rules and contracts that our kids have some hope of achieving. The idea that you're going to we need to keep our kids at the table.
Mm-hmm.
When our kids mess up, we need to say, you messed up, come back to the table. You messed up again, come back to the table. Come back. We need to keep our kids engaged with us. When you kick kids out of extracurriculars, it just gives them more time to drink and drugs. And that's sort of backwards from what we want to do.
That's a chicken and egg, because I've always said the best way to keep the kids out of trouble is to keep them in sports, and I do agree with that. Dr. Bevis, you got to hang on to that thought, because we're gonna. By the way, don't think I'm ignoring your calls. I know we got a couple of calls lined up, and we're going to get to them right after this break. You are on Let Them Play with Coach Tony. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.